Bouchard, Michelle
Present.
Wilson.
Present.
Thank you. Kelly McKenzie.
Present.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Present.
Thank you. Mike Denby. Steve Trussell. J.C. Porter. Dave Berry. Danae Pressler.
Present.
Thank you. Anne Murray.
It's Amy Murray, and I am present.
Thank you. John Sherrill.
Present.
Thank you. Derek Castaneda. Ed Stillings. Ron Gritman. Hondo Judd. Lisa Anderson.
Present.
Thank you. Monica Rabb. Spencer Camps. Rick Williams.
Here.
Thank you.
I think I was muted. I'm here. This is Monica Rabb.
Thank you, Monica. Kim Butler.
Here.
Thank you. Aaron Cooper.
Present.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro. William Beloit.
Here.
Thank you. Matthew Potzler. Thank you. Scott DeBias. Stan Ballone.
Here.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Present.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Present.
Thank you. Michelle Kamikawa.
Present.
Thank you. Jonathan Fudge.
Present.
Thank you. John Woods.
Present.
Thank you. Mike Chamberlain.
Present.
Thank you. Susie Stevens.
Present.
Thank you. Robert Forrest.
Present.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone?
Michael Denby.
Thank you, Mike. Madam Vice Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. A quorum is now present. The meeting of the MAG Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Our next item is call to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. I have not received any requests to speak cards for this agenda item.
Madam Vice Chair, we have not received any comments.
Okay. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to the meeting. Staff, do we have any written comments for this agenda item?
We do not.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 3. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the March 30th, 2023 meeting minutes. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chair, this is Walt Bouchard. I don't have any discussion item, but I did want to let you know that I am on the call, and if you'd add me to the attendees, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. We've got that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on the meeting minutes? Prior to approval, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on agenda item number 3? I don't have any requests to speak cards. Staff, do you have any written comments for this item?
Madam Vice Chair, I do not have any.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the March 30th, 2023 meeting minutes?
Deb Ferraro, City of Mesa. I'm a little late to join, but I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
And this is Scott Tobias, Pinal County. I second.
Thank you. Can we have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Those who wish to abstain from the vote, say abstain. Thank you. A roll call vote of all members participating virtually will now be taken at this time by Lisa Young.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Members of the committee, when I call your name, please state your vote. Walter Bouchard.
Yes.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson.
Aye.
Thank you. Kelly McKenzie.
Aye.
Thank you. Beverly Chanowski.
Aye.
Thank you. Mike Denby.
Sorry, late on my mute. Aye.
Thank you. Danae Pressler.
Aye.
Thank you. Amy Murray.
Aye.
Thank you. John Sherrill.
Aye.
Thank you. Derek Castaneda. Hondo Judd. Lisa Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Monica Rab.
Aye.
Thank you. Spencer Camps.
Aye.
Thank you. Rick Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. Kim Butler.
Aye.
Thank you. Aaron Cooper.
Aye.
Thank you. Deb Ferraro.
Aye.
Thank you. William Beloy.
Aye.
Thank you. Scott Tobias.
Aye.
Thank you. Stan Ballon.
Aye.
Thank you. Kristen Watt.
Aye.
Thank you. Tim Connor.
Aye.
Thank you. Michelle Kamikawa.
Aye.
Thank you. Jonathan Fudge.
Aye.
Thank you. John Woods.
Aye.
Thank you. Mike Chamberlain.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Forrest.
Aye.
Thank you. Susie Stevens.
Aye.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we have a unanimous vote.
Thank you. The motion is approved for the minutes. Our next item is number 4, EPA guidance on the preparation of the state implementation plan provisions that address the non-attainment area contingency measure requirements for ozone and particulate matter. And this will be presented by Matt Poppin of the Maricopa Association of Governments.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Next slide, please. And next slide. So EPA has recently come out with draft guidance that we wanted to share with you. But in terms of background, I just wanted to remind everybody what a contingency measure is and what the requirement is. So Clean Air Act Section 172 C9 defines what a contingency measure is, and this is for any non-attainment area plan, whether it be an ozone plan or a particulate matter plan. They all have to have contingency measures. The idea behind a contingency measure is if a plan should fail to result in attainment, or if you fail to meet reasonable further progress, which is specified emission reductions according to each pollutant, then you have to have a measure waiting to be activated when that happens. So if you fail to attain, or if you fail to make reasonable further progress, control measures are supposed to kick in and provide additional emission reductions to help you attain or meet that reasonable further progress goal. Next slide, please. So EPA has recently come out with some new draft guidance. They provided a notice of this, and their draft guidance is available on their website as well as in your agenda packet today. Comments on the draft guidance are already passed. They were due April 24th, 2023. Next slide. Thank you. So really, EPA outlines the purpose of the guidance that they want to address because they've had long-standing kind of interpretation of what's needed in the contingency measures, but they've had to update that to address some recent new situations. So really the purpose of this guidance, though, is focused. It's to provide guidance for air agencies who are preparing non-attainment area plans for ozone and particulate matter, so PM10 or PM 2.5. There are some things the guidance doesn't address. It doesn't address contingency measure requirements for maintenance plan. That's under a different section of the Clean Air Act, and there's different provisions associated with that. There's also some unique provisions for extreme ozone non-attainment areas and also other pollutants like carbon monoxide or sulfur dioxide. EPA's old guidance remains in effect for those pollutants. So this guidance really is only focused on ozone, PM10, and PM 2.5. Next slide, please. So one of the main drivers of this new guidance is a series of recent court decisions that invalidated some key aspects of EPA's historical approach to implementing contingency measures. One that we're familiar with here is court decisions that say you cannot use measures that are already implemented as contingency measures. So if a control measure is in place currently, you cannot also use that as a contingency measure. It has to be a brand new measure that will only be triggered should you fail to attain or fail to make reasonable further progress. So what that does really is it really puts planning agencies and the regulatory agencies in a situation where they have to set aside control measures, get them ready to go should an area fail to attain. So for our plans going forward, we need to have these types of measures. We do have one currently in the serious area plan for West Pinal, speed limit on unpaved road that would kick in should we fail to attain or make reasonable further progress. The other big issue that EPA tries to address is because the Clean Air Act has been in existence now, or the amendments have been in existence now for over 30 years, and there are areas that have been in non-attainment for a long time, there's just not that many control measures left to be able to set aside for contingency measures and to get the required emission reductions needed for those contingency measures. So EPA is also addressing the situation where an area might not have enough measures available to meet contingency measure requirements. Next slide. So there's really three key aspects of the guidance that I want to focus on and highlight today. One, and these are new things that differ from prior guidance. One, EPA has provided a new method to use that calculates the amount of emission reductions needed that contingency measures should provide. So when we put in a contingency measure in our plan, we also have to state how much emission reductions that contingency measure is expected to achieve when it kicks in. So EPA has a new method for calculating how much is needed. Second, EPA addresses a situation where there aren't enough contingency measures available to meet that new emission reduction requirement. So there's some new requirements that EPA has put in there. And then lastly, EPA provides some clarity on the time period when emission reductions from contingency measures should occur. So we'll go over these three aspects. Next slide. So in terms of the new emission reduction method, the old method was something called a contingency measure had to have at least 1 year's worth of reasonable further progress. And that's defined a little bit differently depending on the pollutant. For ozone, that's generally 3% of base year emissions. That's 1 year's worth of reasonable further progress. For particulate matter, it was based on the difference between your base year and your attainment year kind of the annual reductions you see averaged out between those years. I put the definition up here. It's not an easy definition to read through and understand, so I'm going to provide an example. But largely, EPA, what they're trying to do with this new method is they have a realization that as time goes on, your emissions get lower and lower and lower. So to have to go back to base year as the basis for the emission reductions needed, by the time you get to the attainment year, that's often very difficult to do because you've already reduced emissions so far. To find another additional 3% from your base year is very difficult to do. So they've come up with this new method. Next slide, please. So I applied this new method to the Serious Area Plan that was recently submitted for West Pinal County just to see the difference. So under the old method, we were required to have a contingency measure that produced 795 tons of PM10 reductions for the year following attainment or the year following failure to meet reasonable further progress. Under this new method, the requirement would be 657 tons. So a little more than 15% or so reduction. It'll be different depending on the ozone plan and the base year and the attainment year. But overall, this new method is expected to result in less emissions needed for contingency measures moving forward. Next slide, please. So what happens if you, even with this new lower level of progress, you can't meet it? EPA's guidance now has a section where they require an infeasibility justification if you can no longer meet that 1 year's worth of progress. And I've really summarized the requirements. The requirements are pretty detailed in the guidance, but the two main ones is you have to go through a pretty thorough examination of all relevant emission sources, whether that's for ozone or PM, depending on the plan you're doing, and the range of existing and potential control measures. So this is very similar to what we do when we do a reasonable available control measures analysis or a BACM control measure analysis. We have to lay out emissions and all the measures that are available. And then you look at possible contingency measures and you do a economic and technological feasibility analysis of those measures to decide if you could implement them or if they are either too costly or there's other hurdles technologically that would allow them not to be implemented. So you would go through that justification, you'd make that to EPA and you'd say, you know, there's only these two contingencies measures left that we feel like we can reasonably implement. And that's okay if they no longer meet that 1 year's worth of progress. Now, EPA does anticipate that a state will be able to identify at least some contingency measures. So I don't think there's ever a situation where we could submit a plan with no contingency measures at all. But those contingency measures don't necessarily have to meet that 1 year's worth of progress anymore, as long as you go through an infeasibility justification for why there are no other measures available that can serve that role as a contingency measure. Next slide. And lastly, the other aspect I want to highlight is the timing of when contingency measures need to be implemented. So this really hasn't changed. EPA still expects that within 60 days after failure to attain or failure to make reasonable further progress, the contingency measure would kick in. So you have 60 days kind of administratively to get that measure up and running. In general, EPA would like to see the emission reductions occur within 1 year of a triggering event. Again, if you fail to attain, they want to see those emission reductions from the contingency measure take place within 1 year. But in situations, again, where there aren't enough contingency measures available, EPA is allowing those emission reductions to be spread out over a 2-year period. So they would rather prefer that you would have contingency measures that may take a while to be implemented than to not have them at all. So there's a little bit more flexibility there with when reductions should occur from contingency measures in a plan. Next slide. So that's the summary of the draft guidance. If there are any questions available.
Thank you. This item is for information and discussion. Are there any questions from the members? Okay. We'll move on to number 5, which is the EPA announcement of new proposed federal vehicle emission standards. And again, Matt Poppin, Maricopa Association of Governments.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Yeah, we wanted to take some time to just walk through briefly these new proposed standards. And of course, they are proposed, so we'll see what the final standards are, but they are pretty significant. So we wanted to take some time to highlight what the possible emission reductions could be from these new standards. So on April 12th, EPA did announce these new standards. And since that time, both of these have been published in the Federal Register. So they are available now with comment periods as well. But there are really 2 separate standards that EPA proposed. The first one was a multi-pollutant emission standard for model years 2027 and later, light duty and medium duty vehicles. And then there's also a new proposed standard, greenhouse gas standard for heavy duty vehicles. This is a phase 3, so adding to already existing phase 1 and phase 2 greenhouse gas standards for heavy duty vehicles. Next slide, please. So I wanted to pull out some highlights from the fact sheets that were provided in your agenda packet, just to kind of highlight the emission reductions that may be possible from these new proposed actions. So for light duty vehicles and medium duty vehicles, there's a new greenhouse gas standard that EPA proposing. It would affect model year vehicles 2027 through 2032. So the dashed line is the current standard, roughly about 185 grams per mile. And then EPA in the proposal has a couple different alternatives, but you can see over time, beginning in model year 2027 all the way down to model year 2032, there's a pretty significant reduction in that gram per mile of CO2 emitted for these medium or light duty and medium duty vehicles. So we're going from the current level of 185 down to somewhere in the range of 90 to 70. So pretty substantial reduction in terms of greenhouse gas. In particular, so that was for light duty vehicles. For medium duty vehicles, these are heavy vans, heavy pickup trucks, some of the delivery trucks you see out there. The current, in 2027, you have basically a 393 grams per mile, and that will drop all the way down to 243 by 2032. Similarly for pickups, starting at 462 down to 292 grams per mile. And then if you're a vehicle manufacturer that makes both types of vehicles, you can go under a combined standard, which is kind of an average of the two. So we see both significant reductions for light duty vehicles and medium duty vehicles in this proposed rule. Next slide. In terms of criteria pollutants, which we're always interested here in terms of our ozone problem and our particulate matter issues, EPA had 2 criteria pollutants they were really addressing, actually 3. 2 in terms of ozone and particulate matter. So they combine non-methane organic gases, which we often call volatile organic compounds as well. It's a combined standard with NOx. So you see in this table, this is for the first column is the model year. So model year 2026 represents the current tier 3 tailpipe standards that we have talked about that came into effect in 2014 model year vehicles. The current is 30 milligrams per mile for a combination of VOCs and NOx. That drops all the way down to 12 by 2032. So that's over 50% reduction. In terms of the medium duty vehicles, the current standards are 178 and 247, and they drop all the way down to 60. So pretty significant tailpipe reduction in those pollutants as well, if the proposed should go through as stated currently. And then additionally, at the bottom there's a new standard for particulate matter of 0.5 milligrams per mile, which is less than the current Tier 3 standard as well. Next slide. So how does EPA think these reductions will occur? They're letting automakers choose the set of controls that will reach these standards. So they're not prescribing, particular control technologies that car makers would have to use in order to meet these. But EPA does provide a pathway that they think, one pathway that they think most automakers would choose to meet these. So in order to meet these, their assumption is that you would have a 70% of the light duty fleet would be battery electric vehicle by model year 2032 in terms of what would be sold. That includes light duty passenger cars, SUVs, and light duty pickup trucks. For the medium duty category, they're assuming 40% battery electric would be sold by 2032. And then a couple other technologies, gasoline particulate filters, they believe will be used to help reach that particulate matter emissions goal. And then they also see room for improvements in technologies to reduce CO2 from conventional gasoline engines as well. They don't list what those are, but I guess there are some out there that can help as well. So moving on to the heavy duty vehicles. So these are, again, the new rule would start with model year 2027, and these would be more stringent than the current phase 2 for what they're calling vocational vehicles and day cab tractors. So vocational vehicles could be garbage trucks or school buses, those types of things. And the stringency increases every model year from 2028 through 2032. For sleeper cab tractors, these are the largest semi trucks where folks sleep in them overnight. New standards would be introduced in model year 2030, and then they increase in stringency in model years 2031 and 2032. Next slide. Again, EPA is assuming that manufacturers can choose whatever controls they think is best suited for their vehicle fleet to meet these standards. EPA does provide some projections. They're assuming 50% zero emission vehicles for vocational vehicles. Again, those are school buses, garbage trucks, specific heavy duty vehicles that have a specific function. They're assuming those vehicles will use a mix of battery electric and fuel cell technologies by model year 2032. For the day cab, semi-trucks or tractors, they're assuming a 34% zero emission vehicle penetration with a combination, again, of battery electric and fuel cell. And then for those sleeper trucks, for those long distance trucks, they're actually assuming that you'd have 25% zero emission, and you primarily see fuel cell technology for those. And what I'd also add is, while these standards are only directed at greenhouse gas, so CO2, EPA does project that if this were to go forward, you would have co-benefits. You would also see reductions in NOx and VOC as well, with manufacturers switching over to zero emission vehicles. Even though there are no new NOx and VOC requirements in this rule, that was in a prior rule we've talked about earlier. This one is just greenhouse gas. Next slide. So that's a summary of these proposed standards. If there are any questions, I'm available to take them.
Thank you, Matt. Again, this item is for information and discussion only. So is there any questions from the members or audience? I just had one. So if this does go into effect, we can try to roll these into what we're proposing and doing, and seeing if that helps our modeling, based on hopefully more people will be buying those lower emission vehicles in the state.
Yeah, of course, the benefits are a little far out, right? So we wouldn't see anything until 2027. But yes, if these go final, what EPA often does is they'll update their MOVES model. So whenever we run emissions for years 2027 and beyond, EPA's MOVES model will now take these controls into as if they have been implemented. And so we'll start seeing those emission reductions in future years. But hopefully, we'll see them actually occur earlier, right? So manufacturers might want to get ahead of the curve and start getting these out there earlier or on a quicker pace than they would have. So hopefully we can maybe get some benefits if they do go final from these rules, even beyond the specific model year targets.
Terrific. Thank you. Any other follow-up?
Yes, this is Tim Connor, City of Scottsdale. Matt, I'm assuming then that this is really upon the manufacturers. It's not upon our fleets. We would have to just be purchasing these new vehicles as they come out of the manufacturing process. Is that correct?
Right, that's correct. This is totally on the manufacturers to meet these new standards. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. And that kind of means for those that are representing municipalities or counties that we need to be prepared on our own side, that might be the direction that the manufacturers go. So I think that's part of what we've been discussing in the air quality here. Anything else? Go ahead.
Danae Pressler.
Thank you. Go ahead, Denise.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the commission, is there a what would be the timeline of when we would know if these have been adopted or if a different version has been adopted?
I don't have the Federal Register notices with me, so I'm not sure when the comment dates are. I know they've been published in the Federal Register. It's usually 30 days, but for these kind of significant rules, it's often 60 days or longer. And then EPA responds to those comments and then issues a final rule. So if we're looking at kind of other similar types of rules, I would think late this year or early next year would probably be a reasonable time frame for when EPA would go final with these. But it's very hard to tell. It's very hard to know what kind of comments they'll get and how it will move forward at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further? Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item number 6, which is request for future items. Are there any requests by the membership for an item on a future agenda?
Hi, this is Danae with City of Avondale. I know Meg is working on a plan for regional electrification readiness. I believe that report will be done sometime next month. So maybe at a future agenda later this summer, we could see the results of that at this committee and what that would mean for air quality.
Thank you, Danae. That was good comment. Any further thoughts? And if you think of something later, you can always send it to MAG staff as well.
Hi, this is Tim Connor again, City of Scottsdale. I realize that the ozone issues are starting to be elevated into the different committees of MAG. Are we going to be able to understand shortly how those committees are reacting, such as the management committee, the executive committee, et cetera? Will we be able to get some reaction back from that? Thank you.
Yeah, for a future item brought to this, I think he's asking for the things that we've moved forward to the regional council. Are we going to get some feedback so that we know where we stand with what we've kind of moved forward? And then we have to start on the plan, right? Because this was just the list of measures that could be chosen, but that's all it was, kind of a menu.
So I think to speak to kind of where we're at in the agenda item, we'd be happy to give you, monthly updates, kind of nothing's happened or everything's happened. So the vice chair wants to agendize that as a standing item. We're certainly happy to give you guys those updates. So
I think that's kind of, Tim, if you're, I think
yes, that does answer my question. That'd be great, because I'm getting questions from different council members. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would help us all to know where we're at and where it's proceeding, so we can report back to our agencies. Anything further? Great. So now our business is concluded. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Tim Connor, so moved, excuse me.
Thank you, Tim.
Deb Ferraro, I second that motion.
Great. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.